Hey everyone, welcome to Past Lives and the Divine. I'm Gina, and this is the podcast where we roll around in conversations about our connection to and experience with past lives and the divine. The divine out there, above us, inside of each of us. And we do this for healing or like reaching our full potential in this life or simply for pure entertainment. That's an option too. So in today's episode number 2, we are talking about connection, a fear of commitment, a fear of failure, and what it's like when you're in relationship with someone and you can see that connection disintegrating in front of your eyes. So whether that's something you're dealing with or hopefully not, and you just want to sit courtside and hear about this story, I'm here for that too. So hopefully you like this episode that we're about to dive into. But before we do that, I want to let you know a couple things. So in episode number 3, I'm going to go through the anatomy of a past life regression session. Because while I was recording this, I was thinking, gosh, I should really go through the anatomy of what a past life regression session is. So I'm going to actually dedicate an episode to it. So if you're a little confused or like, what is that thing? I did explain some things in this episode, but I'm going to be going more into that in episode number 3. So if you want to get that delivered to your inbox, get your little fingertips to type yourself to pastlivesandthedivine.com and subscribe to the email list. And that'll just be delivered right to your inbox. Make it so easy for you. Because I care. Okay, so that is episode number 3. And a couple things you should know about today's episode as well. Some of the recordings that I spliced in are a little quiet. And with that, the volume has been adjusted. So it shouldn't be an issue, but if it seems a little quiet, I do a good job kind of prefacing it and debriefing after the little recording snippets. So you shouldn't miss anything, even if it is a little quiet. And I added those in there for variety. So you're not just listening to me yap on and on for an hour and a half or however long this is going to take me. So thank you so much for listening. And if you have any questions or comments, I want to hear them. So stay tuned after the episode. At the end, I will tell you how you can continue the conversation because I really want this to be a conversation. I don't want to just be talking at you every episode. I want to hear what you think. So with that in mind, gather around the fire. Let's get this thing started. January 2015 was my first session as a client of past life regression. And the reason I scheduled that appointment was because I wanted to release, understand, so I could release, learn more about what I thought at the time was my fear of commitment. Now, after going through the past life regression, I realized that it wasn't a fear of commitment, which is also the benefit of regression and hypnosis, is you can kind of logically think there's a problem on a conscious level, but really it's something deeper, and so you can just go right to that root. So, I was happy that's how I tackled this. And for me, I knew that I wanted to try past life regression. And so when this issue came up, it just seemed like a natural fit. Because for me, I am someone who takes action. I make decisions quickly. And oftentimes I'm doing those things too fast. That's my problem, as opposed to not being able to take action, not being able to make a decision. And so when I saw this part of my life where I was like, you know what, I want this thing, but I cannot take the action to get it. I'm just like paralyzed. I just shut down. I don't want to have conversations about it, but I want it. It was just like these two deep psychological things at war within me. And so the issue around it where it came up was getting married. And I never wanted to get married. I never saw myself as getting married. I'm sure there's a few reasons for that, but one of the reasons was I love a lot of people who are married. I genuinely like a lot of people who are married. But when I would look at their union or look at their struggles day to day, it was like, shit, I do not want that. Like, that is not something that I want in my life. I've got plenty of problems. Those are not my problems, and I don't want those problems. But then in walked Alex, my husband now. And just after getting to know him and spending time with him, it was like I just had this really deep soul knowing, like, I want to be with this person all the time, forever and ever. And I want everybody to look at our connection and know that we're connected, right? Just so I can get that energy back from people. Because you probably wouldn't know this, but if you're in a long-term relationship and you see yourself going a long way with someone, now people use the term partner a lot more, but like to use the term girlfriend and boyfriend back then, it was like, I could feel this, I'm very empathic, and I could feel this like shift in like how they thought about it, right? Like it wasn't that big of a deal. Like we were bound to break up. And so what I wanted, the energetics that I wanted from other people was them to see us how I saw us, which was like a partnership forever. This is me personally. I'm not saying everyone needs to do this, obviously. I also felt this drive of like, I want to be with this person so bad, and I want to be just so committed to this person and like wrapped up with them. And what that means today in this time on third dimension Earth is to get married. Because when you're married, you have a lot more legal rights when it comes to that other person. If they're unconscious, and you can go visit them in the hospital, or all of these things. And it was just like, marriage was kind of like the automatic of, now we're legally bound and we're family in the eyes of other people, in the eyes of the law. And that's just really what I wanted. But every time we talked about it, or were like, well, should we do it? I was like, yeah, but not now. Yeah, I can't talk about it. And so for me, that was a big red flag. Like, okay, knowing this was something that I wanted, also knowing that I was unable to take the action to get there. So that was my signal for, this might be a good thing to try with past life regression. And so I called Eric Christopher and scheduled an appointment. And Eric Christopher does past life regression. He's located in St. Paul, Minnesota. And he does past life regression, among other things. So at my session with him, the first thing we did was chatted and then set up an intention statement that we could say and focus on for these sessions. So the intention statement was, show me a life that will help me heal and release my fear of commitment.
So let yourself kind of tune into that silently into yourself. Just kind of make that statement to your higher guidance with concentration and from your heart. In a few moments, show me a life. In a few minutes, show me a life. Higher guidance, show me a life that can help me heal and release my fear of commitment.
And from there, Eric took me through the induction and then plopped me into my first experience with a past life scene, which was pretty powerful, but also, as the first time client, like everybody else, kind of feel like I'm making it up. But the cool part about it is all you do is just report on what you're thinking, knowing, seeing, feeling, smelling. You are simply just a reporter during these scenes. You're not necessarily trying to figure out why you're seeing what you're seeing at this point. So in the first scene, I was outdoor. It was daytime. When I looked down at my feet, I was wearing these brown kind of boots, and I was wearing a hat of some sort, and I was looking for someone, and that's all I knew. I just had this feeling of, I'm looking for someone. I'm always looking for this person. And after a couple minutes, it settled in that I was actually looking for my husband. And I had been looking for him for a long time. And I felt just like this exasperated, like, where is he? And I wasn't scared. I wasn't scared for me. I wasn't scared for him. I felt like I just needed to find him because I needed to tell him something. And I was always looking for him. And that was the gist of that scene. Just a lot of me standing there feeling kind of frustrated, feeling a little annoyed, just looking for this man. So then we moved on to another scene, another life scene. And we went backwards in time, and I was with my husband. My husband in that life, not Alex. This was not Alex. And we were inside, we were in our home. It was like a wood floor, really rough, and just a really small home. Like, I just think of it as like Laura Ingalls Wilder in that show. If you grew up watching that show, that's kind of the time period, or at least that's what it looked like. And And so Eric prompted me to look at my husband and look in his eyes and see what his energy was like. Like, what is he feeling? Kind of what's true for him right now? How is he in life? And when you do that in a past life scene, this is a time when you can pick up sometimes on their energy and you can see like, oh, this is someone else in my life. But I didn't know this person at the time. So I was just like, he's not familiar. His energy's not familiar. He had these big blue eyes. And his other energy was like, he's focused. He's tired, like tired from hard work. He works so hard and he works a lot and he works the land that we live on. And then when I tuned into my own energy toward him in that scene, I just felt really disconnected. And it was this sense of disconnection that had come from knowing that at one time we were really connected. So it was also kind of like a sadness in that disconnection as well. So after observing and investigating that scene, observing our energies within us and around each other and toward each other, then we move to the next scene.
Move to a mealtime scene. Let yourself move to the point of the meal where you're taking it in, where you're consuming the meal. Noticing the smell, the taste of the food. Become aware of any dishes or utensils you may be using. And does it feel more like you made that meal, or does it feel more like someone else made it?
I made it.
Become aware of who joins you in the meal. Does your husband join you?
Yeah.
Is there anyone else there, or is it just the two of you?
Just us.
Okay.
In the timeline of this life, this meal scene took place further back or a little bit earlier in the life that was in the previous scene where I was observing his energy and my energy. And it wasn't that much earlier, but we were more connected than we were in that life where I was observing our energy. And even though we were more connected than that, it was still a sense of loss and sadness because we were so disconnected compared to where we had come from. And now at this point, these are all the scenes, obviously, that I had experienced. And so it was just this sense of like, this disconnection is not right. Like, we used to be so much more. And it was so strong and powerful and so sad. And what's funny about life is like this moment right now, even you just listening to this podcast, you're doing more than just listening to this podcast, right? Like, you're carrying with you what's going on around you. Maybe you're focusing on kind of what's in the back of your mind is like what's happening later today or tomorrow or what happened earlier today or this week or this month. We're so much more than what we're actually doing. And past life regression, past life scenes that you experience is the same. It's like the meal doesn't really matter, but what matters is like all of the emotions. And in a past life regression, in that hypnotic state, a lot of people think we, are pretty much blackout. We don't know what's going on. And I do think that that's probably part of stage hypnosis, but this is not stage hypnosis. And what it really is when you're experiencing these past lives is like your senses are turned way up. So even if in that life it was a subtle feeling, like it's turned way up, because when you're in that hypnotic state, your senses are actually on high alert. And that's why we can get such vivid scenes and emotions from these lives. And of course, just like you hear all the time when people are looking back on their kids growing up or looking back on their life and how they spent their life, oftentimes you'll hear like the big things are the small things and the small things are the big things. And it's true. And we can logically get it. And I think that's another benefit of a past life regression is like you can have that deathbed point of view or a long life point of view and really feel it and see it and experience it and get it deep into your soul. And that just changes how you live life going forward. Because you're living that life going forward with that memory. And a memory is totally different than an idea of what someone else said they felt. So that's really the difference there. So after that scene, then we went on to the next scene, and that scene is where I met my husband. So hop on this magic carpet ride and let's get to that scene.
We're going to go backwards in time. You'll go backwards in time to around the time where you first met your husband. 3, 2, and now 1.
So as this scene came into focus, it was clear that I was with friends. I'm not sure who, but it was this feeling of with friends. And we were in a town scene. So I don't know. I think of it like the movie Tombstone with like Val Kilmer. Kind of like an Old West vibe, dirt road, pretty busy, but it is a small place. So it wouldn't take a lot of people to make it busy. And there was, storefronts on either side of the road. And I was with friends and just like unbelievably happy. And I was just so carefree, and we were laughing and joking around. And it was like I had a bag full of things, like we were running errands. And I turned around and I slammed into someone, and all of these things in the bag went everywhere.
What's happening here?
We're laughing. Standing on a street. A lot of people around. And we're really happy. We're so happy that it makes me cry to think about it.
Just let yourself feel that. Feel the scene, feel the happiness.
Even to this day, like, over 4 years later, when I hear that, like, I get teared up because it was so strong, and like these feelings of joy and happiness and like lightness and just carefree. And man, it's like words are just such a letdown when I'm trying to explain like how happy I was. And so he was the person that I slammed into, and it was almost like my happiness was so infectious to him, because when I slammed into him and stuff went everywhere, he started laughing and was just like almost like swept into like the wave of our fun, and he was picking things up and helping us. And in my mind, I was just thinking like, wow, he is so handsome and he's helping me, and why would he even be paying attention to me? He even seems to like me. And it was almost like this disbelief within this just like pure, joyful, funny moment.
Do you feel very connected to him here on the street?
Yeah.
A deep connection.
Yeah, but I think we just met.
Okay. And feel what it feels like to just meet him.
So being in this scene and feeling this connection to him, it was almost like I went from being in the scene with my friends, laughing, being carefree, slamming into him, turning around. And then it was like him and I were just like in our own world. And I felt so connected to him, but also like, who is this handsome man? Why have I never seen him before? And why is he being so helpful to me? And it was just like, he's handsome, he's helpful. I just felt so connected and just like magnetically drawn to his orbit. And that was my point of view in the scene, went from like, oh, me and my friends having a good time, to just like totally, I don't know, it's hard to explain, but just like him and I were almost like in our own world. Like everything, it just like, my perception zooms in on him and everything around us is just kind of blurry. And it's just him and I now laughing and picking these things up. I just felt so beyond connected to him. It was amazing.
And now let yourself move forward a little bit in time. When I play the tone, you move forward in time to the next scene. 3, 2, and 1.
In this scene, I'm at home, in our home together, and it was soon after we got married. And so knowing that, Eric then asked me just to reflect on the wedding, like the day we got married, and how I was feeling on that day.
Excited, nervous.
You were nervous?
Yeah, I don't know why he'd want to marry me.
Yeah. Is part of you a little suspicious, or you just don't understand why he'd want to marry you?
No, I feel like he's better than me.
Okay.
Okay, this is where I really start to see the parallels between my life as this woman in this past life experience that I'm having in this session and my life today as Gina. Because I would say that a lot when I first started dating Alex, when I just even to this day, sometimes I feel like, why are you with me? It's almost like, I don't want to ask you this just in case you wake up to it. And I know I'm a good person. I know I bring things to the table, whether people can see them or not. But it is a parallel in our lives. And now this is where our parallels really start to sync up. And it's not necessarily who I am today, but like definitely a parallel between this woman in this past life and who I was when I went through this past life regression. During this scene, this is when Eric also asked me another question. And remember, in this scene, I'm not actually at the wedding. I'm like at home after we're married, and I'm reflecting on our wedding. And he asked me, does life at this stage in this scene, does married life feel good to you? And the only thing that kept coming up was this comparison to like who we both were and the experience we had when we very first met. And so the thought I had was, it's not as good as we felt in the street. And then Eric asked, well, what's different? And I said, I'm alone, and the life or feelings that I have now aren't as rich. And I just felt like my life is just like so boring. Almost like the scene who we used to be was like full color, and now I'm just like flat, living in black and white. So from here we head on to the next important scene in this life. And after Eric led me there, I realized I was indoors and I was at a funeral or a wake, some sort of end of life ceremony. And my age I thought was about 34. And it took me a while to figure it out, but I was actually at my husband's funeral or wake, his kind of end of life ceremony or process. And Eric asked me how he had died.
Getting a picture of him laying in grass.
Okay.
But he's just laying there beside I don't know what it is, like a piece of machinery.
Okay.
So from my memory in this regression, from what I could gather, how he died, it was like a sudden accident. And because I just see him, when I think of how he died, I just see him in my mind's eye, laying in the grass with maybe like a chest wound or something. Maybe a piece of machinery that he was using, something went wrong or an accident happened. But he was working when he died, and he was alone when he died. I don't know if I was the one to find him. Eric had asked me if that opening scene, the very first scene I experienced, he had asked me if that was related to my husband's death. And I don't know. But what I do know is that him dying in the field was not necessarily, I mean, it was obviously a one-time thing, but what it was like, it wasn't unnatural for me to be looking for him. And he was always gone. And I just had this feeling like I was always waiting for him or looking for him. And he just had a lot going on, and he was always really hard at work, and we had a lot of land to work. I'm not entirely sure what that means, but he was always just kind of MIA. And not like in a bad way, but just like he was taking care of business. And I felt torn because when he was gone a lot, I missed him, but I also hated being alone so much that I started to resent him. And I felt so torn because I knew the work needed to be done, but I felt resentful of him when he was back, even though I was resentful because I was home alone all the time and I just wanted to be around him. And I wanted our connection to get back to what it used to be. And so after going through that in our married life together, the last few years that we were married and both living, we were so distant from each other, it was just really hard to get back. So what really lived there was a lot of disconnection and resentment. So I guess this is the biggest parallel between this woman's life and my life at the time of this past life regression session, like 4.5 years ago. And at the time, I was working for myself. I was doing wellness coaching and some corporate consulting. And for the most part, my work took place at home. I would go out and do speaking or consulting, or sometimes I would meet up and coach someone. But for the most part, my work was at home. And I really liked it. But what was so weird was that I am someone in this life who loves to be alone. I need a lot of alone time. And it was so bizarre because at that time of my life, I remember we had just moved into the condo we live now, and Alex would come home from work and I would just feel like kind of crabby toward him. And it would take some mental effort to like get over that. And some days I could and some days I couldn't. And I just remember thinking in my mind, like, what the hell's going on, Gina? You love being home alone. So like, why are you annoyed that he's gone all day? And I did not go into this past life regression looking to heal that part of our relationship. And that part of our relationship was healed. And that's what's so cool about hypnosis in general is a lot of times we go in for one thing and we kind of heal a few things, and we'll heal things where it's like, oh, that was an issue, but it wasn't like a big enough issue where I felt like I needed to go get help for it. And that's really what helped me. And that's another thing is, for me personally, people will ask, like, how often do you go get these sessions? Or how often should I come back and do a past life regression? And it's really depends on the person, and it depends on the issue and how tangled and deep it is. But for me, a good indication of like when I need to go deeper into my subconscious mind, into regression or into hypnosis, is when you're at that point where it's like, logically, I can see why I should not feel this way, but I cannot stop feeling this way. And this is an example. Like, I loved being at home alone. I liked my work for the most part. And the parts of my work that I didn't like didn't have anything to do with me being home alone. But there was still this rub. And I believe that when we have these frictions in our lives, our cells hold on to them. And our DNA and all of that is influenced by our soul. And so when we don't heal that in a past life or in this life, that is an imprint, an impression, a way of being that we can easily bring into another life. And so sometimes when I'm talking to people, they're like, oh, I've been meaning to do a past life regression. It's just my past life. It's in the past, right? And for me personally, it's just not my style. And past life regression doesn't work if I'm like hard pressuring sales, like, you should do this, get in the chair, let's schedule the appointment. It really needs to be self-elected, and someone needs to really be feeling like this is what they want to do in order for them to get the most out of it. But what I like to then say is like, yeah, it's in the past, but it's in your soul. So you're still carrying that baggage with you. And it's not necessarily like, shame on you, you need to come fix it. I'm just saying, be totally aware of that. And so just by going through, this is also an example of going through these past life scenes, me seeing that parallel between, oh, maybe this is like at the root of why I have these unexplainable feelings in my life today as Gina, living in Minneapolis, Minnesota, circa 2015. Maybe that's why I feel that way. And this is an example of sometimes in hypnosis or regression, just simply bringing what's unconscious to your conscious mind. You can say, oh, that's what that is. And then it just like never bothers you again. And so it literally, that's something that I went in not knowing I was going to heal it, no intention to heal it, and came out and it was completely gone, which is so fucking cool, right? So tangents. That's why I'm making this podcast, because I could talk about this stuff forever. My experience with it, your experience with it. So, okay. So back to that scene, right? I'm at the wake or the funeral of my husband. He had died suddenly. And what do I feel? I'm feeling incredibly numb. I don't feel much of anything. I don't feel a lot of sadness that he's gone. The overall thing is it almost feels like I'm drifting in a cloud. Like I have no feelings about this. And that's it. I can't say I was like super sad that he had died. It was just, I was incredibly numb. So part of that I'm assuming is like, because it was the funeral services, I was maybe just like in shock. But overall, I just felt this sense of like nothingness, numbness. And so Eric and I move forward to another scene. And so this scene, I'm indoors, I'm at home, in a bigger house, and I'm all alone. And it's been a long time since my husband passed away. And I can see myself sitting in this like kind of old wood, maybe a rocking chair, but an old wood chair. And I can see I have gray hair, like long gray hair. It's swept back like in a low ponytail. And I'm just like kind of like staring at the floor. It's daytime. And the silence is just, it's so loud. Now, this is another weird thing. So I don't know if you've ever had these experiences where the silence is so loud, it's almost like a buzzing in your ear. And this was another thing. I, prior to this past life regression, used to be someone where I hated silence. I hated it. It made me feel weird. And so I always had like the TV on, the radio on. And I even remember traveling with a friend once and she was like, really, you like can't be in silence. The moment we got to the hotel room, you just like turned on the TV. And it was this weird, like, yeah, I kind of knew that, but then it's different when a friend brings it up or someone who's observing your behavior. And it's like, shit, yeah, that is true. And I knew that was true. And going through this past life regression was like, wow, I have had like that, the feeling that I had from this woman being in this chair, in this home, in this silence, and just this numbness and this gross heaviness, that is what I would feel when I'd hear silence in this life. And I remember this from a very young age. Like I remember being, I don't know, if I had to guess, maybe 3 or 4, and I'm sitting in the bedroom I had in the house I grew up in. And I remember just sitting on the floor of the bedroom. I can still see the floor. It was like this wild flooring. I don't know. It was like gray with like these green flowers on it. And I remember just sitting there staring at the floor. And the silence was so loud in my ears. And it was almost this like, I just like, in my memory was like frozen there. I don't know. It's so weird, the shit we remember from childhood. But like, I know I'm not alone. But it's like the silence is so loud. And it was such a gross, heavy, numb, unsatisfied feeling that would grow within me along with this buzzing in my ear. And so that was another thing. When I came out of this past life regression, I did not have that anymore. I was okay with silence. I actually enjoyed silence. I went through a period of my time where I was, quote, cultivating my relationship with silence. And, it's what all the Buddhists and the monks and the meditators and the yogis say. Like, silence is a part of getting to know yourself, and getting to know yourself is part of our reason for being on earth. Getting to know who your soul is on many levels, not just the past life level, but the thoughts that come across your mind, how you feel about things, reoccurring emotions or triggers or thoughts or hopes or dreams. All of these things mean something. And it might be, the cumulative effect of it. But me being able to release that, like, I don't know, I'll just call it like a heavy grossness around silence was really big for me. And it essentially changed like how I do my daily life. I spend a lot of time in silence now. And it feels good and it's restorative. And it's a big part of I believe, like today, my mental health. So it's interesting how, again, you can go into hypnosis for one thing, and you go through hypnosis or regression, and you come out with like all these other things that have been healed that you didn't even think needed healing or were worth your time looking into, and they just become unraveled just like so easily. It's really cool. So here I am in this past life scene, an older woman just sitting in this rocking chair thinking.
Let yourself reflect back on what life has been like for you since your husband passed.
I just feel numb.
Mm-hmm.
It's been a long time, but nothing's really happened.
So in this scene, looking back on my life, it was just like a life filled with almost like I had this dense layer of numbness around me. I never got close to anyone else. I never had kids. It was just this life of kind of a boring day in and day out. But in this numbness, really at the heart of it was this like protection against hurt and against having a connection with someone and losing that connection. And just sitting in that chair as an older woman looking back on my life, it was just very boring and dull. A little bit before he died, and certainly since he had died. And I think this was maybe even like decades after he had died. If you remember, I believe I was about 34 when my husband died. And in this scene, I've got gray hair and I'm alone. And so I think it's been, 2 or 3 decades.
Does it still feel numb that he died? In shock? Or does it feel like there's just a level of sadness that never really goes away?
I don't really feel sad about him dying, but I feel sad that our relationship just kind of crumbled before. It's like I'm sad that I'm not sad.
Okay. Feels sad that the relationship crumbled before he died.
Yeah, to the point that he died and it didn't feel that traumatic.
Okay. Do you feel like the relationship was emotionally dying anyway before?
Yeah.
Yeah, so even all of these decades later, looking back on my husband and his death, I wasn't sad that he had died. What brought me sadness was the way our relationship had like crumbled. It started out so amazing. And I really felt like in this past life perspective, sitting in this rocking chair, I just felt like, what I'm really sad about is what happened to our relationship. And as we'll get into in the future, I can look at it from a third person point of view in the safe, sacred soul space of guidance after the death scene, which is coming up. But right now in this scene as this woman, the only thing that I'm sad about is how our relationship and our connection just crumbled. And that's it. That's like the biggest sadness, and everything else around it is numb. So we moved on from this scene, thankfully. It was just so heavy and boring. And the buzz of that silence was so loud in my ear. Again, when you're in this trance state, you're totally aware of what's going on. It's like your senses are just dialed up. And that silence buzzing in my ear was so loud. So it was a relief to move on. So we moved on to the next scene, and it was kind of like either the final hours or days before my death. And I was at home in bed, and I just remember feeling so tired. Again, I have long gray hair, just like this beautiful long gray mane, which to this day, when I see an older woman rocking just like white or gray hair that's long, I'm like, yes, I want to be you. So that's the hair I had pulled back, laying in bed. And I was really in like the last few conscious moments of this life. And I'm aware of this. I'm aware that these are my last few moments. I'm aware that I'm dying. And I can only feel one thing.
I'm in that bed.
Okay.
I feel nervous.
Tune into that nervousness. And what do you feel most nervous about?
As I laid in that bed, the thing that I was most nervous about, it wasn't about the transition, it wasn't about dying. I was so nervous to see my husband. I knew that it was like, I just felt like I had to face some sort of music on the other side. And I knew it was in relation to our connection and like how I was essentially the one who made it crumble. And now I know that in a partnership, there's two people, but my point of view in this past life was that he was always kind of an open book and very sweet natured and very honest and true and authentic. And so all of the work that he had done for us was really for us, for our relationship. That's how he saw it. And so when I would be crabby or resentful or angry, he just like really did not understand it. And like most people would in that situation, when someone's prickly, you kind of back off. And he, I'm not sure what it was from his point of view, but from my point of view, there was a lot of things on my side of the street that I could have cleaned up that would have preserved or promoted more connection. And so knowing this, it was like on a soul level, laying there in that bed, I just felt like, shit, I'm going to have to like really confront this. Like I really messed this up and this is my fault and I'm going to have to confront it and I'm going to see him. And that's what I was nervous about. And so Eric had me move forward in time just a little bit to when I transitioned out of that body, when my soul pulled out of that body. And so soon I had the past life experience, the perception of hovering above that body. So I could see my body was very tired looking, very old looking, small in the bed. And I knew that there was a nurse around helping, kind of taking care of me, but I didn't feel emotionally close to her. And she was not in the room. So I was alone. And I just looked like I was sleeping, like a very, very deep sleep. And my body looked like really flat. It's this, when someone's close to death or when someone sleeps really hard, I see in my physical eyes, like they look flat. And I have a hard time describing it. And it's a little weird. But for example, when my dad came out of heart surgery, I somehow was in the room and then a nurse came in the room and was like, it's too soon. You shouldn't be here. Like he had just been moved to ICU. And I just remember staring at him being like, dude looks so flat. And I think it's because like when our soul like essentially kind of animates our body. And I don't know if I'm actually seeing someone is flatter or if that's just like my third eye putting a filter on it. I know I'm getting kind of in the weeds here, but that's the way my body looked, was like flat, and my soul was out of it, but I felt a little bit connected to it. And so Eric had prompted me to just look around, kind of get used to being out of the body, and just to see what happens next. Because at some point, it's my understanding that the soul, if you are in a past life regression, in that trance state, accessing that soul memory of what it's like to be lifted out of the body, to be hovering around the body, eventually you will start to feel a pull. And you might feel it physically, you might feel it mentally, or it might be a knowing of I have to go. But it is a pull on some level or multiple levels to move away from that body and move into the soul space, that life in between lives. Some people call it the astral plane, but that's where we're moving from, is the third dimension Earth, and we're moving into another dimension, that life between lives, that astro space, that astral plane, where that is where, it's my belief, and many other people who believe in past lives, that's where you do what you would call a life review. Where when you actually die, you go into this space and your spirit guides are there, or maybe passed on loved ones are there, and they kind of help you like understand the lessons of this life on 3D Earth, and understand, maybe like where you grew as a soul, where you kind of messed up as a soul, where you hurt other people, where you helped other people. And it's not emotional, it's not punishment. It's just simply looking like, hey, this was a lesson. This was an adventure that you went on. Here were your intentions when you chose those parents, that body, that life. And here's how you did in relation to your intentions and maybe some things that you wanted to learn or ways you wanted to grow. And it's not like a punishment or anything like that. It's just a way for your soul to kind of really shed the layers of that heaviness of being on third dimension Earth and move into a space where that soul can learn and grow even more, process the lessons from that time on Earth. And so in a past life regression, when we move from this space of kind of the death scene, you will feel a pull. And from there, in a past life regression, we can go to a space where today, in a quote future life, you can help process as to why you had this memory. Not necessarily why you had this life, but why you had the memory of that life right now. But before I experienced that pull, and this being my first past life regression, I wasn't even entirely sure like what it would feel like, or how do I get that pull to like pull me out of this scene. Because as I was hovering above this body, I could only think of like, this is so boring. That's all I could think.
I feel bored looking at her.
Mm-hmm. There's a feeling of boredom.
Yeah, like I want to go check, see what's next.
Yeah. And tell me what happens next. What do you do next?
And so while I'm the client in the chair, and I've never done this before, all of a sudden I feel my memory, this memory from a soul level, and I'm being turned away. And it's like I can feel physically, I don't know if it was physically or if it was just like so strong in my mind I thought it was physically. I mean, I guess it doesn't really even matter. But I just felt like I was literally being pulled, like being sucked over to the right side. It was such an experience. And I've never had that vivid of an experience kind of like leaving the earth plane since. But it was so interesting to me. And it was just like this feeling of like being sucked over to the right. But in my mind's eye, I'm like being pulled, turned away from that body and pulled somewhere else.
I feel like I kind of turn away from my body and being lifted up.
Just be fully present with that sensation of lifting up, moving higher and higher. As you go higher and higher and further away from that body, let yourself leave behind the density of that body, physically, mentally, emotionally, on all levels. Let yourself go deeper into that part of you that's pure light, energy, and consciousness.
Now, sometimes from a past life perspective, this process of moving from like third dimension Earth to the astral plane or this life between lives where we can, this safe spirit place where we can then reflect on the life. Sometimes it can take a few minutes for someone to kind of totally shed that lower vibration, just a denser frequency of life in the third dimension. And so I don't remember how long it took me, but it did take me a while to kind of release the feeling of being her and come at it from a rational third person point of view, looking on that life. And so when we got to that space, Eric had asked me, when you look back on that life, when you reflect back on that life, what stands out to you the most?
I think I avoided a lot.
What did you avoid?
I just felt numb. I think I did that because we were so happy. It's disappointing. Disappointing how far it crumbled. I felt like it's hard to look at the good times.
Hard to look at the good times.
Yeah.
And what made it crumble? Put the crumbling under a microscope from the vantage point of the soul. What was it that made it crumble?
Not putting in effort. Like when I was alone, sometimes I'd feel resentful.
Okay.
And that would spill over to when I was with my husband. And I think that helped to separate us emotionally. But it's like I couldn't stop.
It's like a pattern that you couldn't hold back on.
Yeah.
It had a grip on you.
Yeah.
And let's just take a moment and rest. Move into the light of source energy. Rest into the light of source energy. Let your whole being just move into the light of source energy and rest here. Letting your entire being just become saturated with the light of source. Feeling the vibrations of deep peace. Feeling the vibrations of joy. Soaking in the vibrations of unconditional love and acceptance. Feeling the vibrations of deep safety and security.
So after releasing that pattern and just kind of bathing in that sound bath vibration, then Eric had me try to call forward the eternal part, or first to really tune into my eternal part of my soul. And then with that, from that space, call forward the eternal part of my husband in that life, his soul. So what that basically means is, if he's reincarnated today and not floating around on the astral plane, but if he's reincarnated today, which I think he is, and I think I might know who this person is, but if he is, then you can call forward the eternal part of his soul and bring it into the same space as the eternal part of my soul, and we can have a little conversation. Healing can take place here. Forgiveness can take place here. Insights you can gain here. And sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. But it's basically another word for this in my vantage point is your higher self. So my higher self, his higher self, we're coming together and like communing basically in a different dimension on the astral plane, in the life in between lives. Because if you think of it like if that creative source where we all came from, where our souls all came from, if that is the ocean, then each life we live, each one of us is a wave, right? We all look a little different. We're maybe headed in little different directions, came from different places, different sizes, different shapes, headed in at different speeds, all of it. And the thought is that we came from the ocean, and just like a wave, we go back to the ocean. And so if you think of it like that, our souls are basically just like these waves coming off the ocean that is like the great creator, source, universal energy. Then there is always a part of us, a part of our souls that, yes, it's occupying this third dimension earth suit, our body, but there is also a connection that is closer to the source, closer to our divine selves. And that's what we would call our higher selves. And little fun fact, if you go get a psychic reading, this is one of the things that your psychic is reading, is your higher self. But what's so cool about trance and work like that is when you can kind of shut off that conscious mind and really tap into the subconscious mind and really open up that intuitive channel, you can then access that information from your own higher self, which is really cool. And then like we're doing in this session, you can also call in other people's higher selves. So I've heard of people doing it, and I've witnessed people, clients of mine, doing it with siblings who have passed, babies who they really want but can't get pregnant or can't stay pregnant with, questions about should I move, should I change my job, how should I prepare food for my kids? How should I help my kids get through difficult times? These are all messages that we can access from our higher self, the part of ourself who was there and helped create the plan for this life. You know, it helped us make the decision as to like the body we're going to choose, the parents we're going to choose, life path and milestones that we're going to choose. So that's a little tidbit on that, little bit of a tangent. But when I did that, calling forth the higher self or the eternal part of my husband in that life's soul, he did not come forward, which is totally fine. We don't need other people to heal. Sometimes it can help us, but if it's not for our highest good at that time, it certainly won't happen. And that's what happened in this session. So we called them forward. I didn't feel anything. I didn't get anything. And so we just moved on from there. So moving on from there, Eric asked me the question, if you were to live that life again, what would you do differently? And this is what I love about this part of the past life regression session, where you move into this space of spiritual guidance. And sometimes this guidance comes from your higher self, and sometimes it comes from a spirit guide, angel, and sometimes it just comes, you don't know where it's coming from. But what I love about it is that the things that we get tend to be so, so simple. So looking back on this past life that I had just experienced, it was like, what is something that I could do differently, right? That could have changed the trajectory of this relationship and of this connection. what could I have done differently?
Laughing. It's a priority.
You'd laugh more as a priority. So these lives are only for learning. These lives are only for living and screwing up royally and learning. So now, since they're just the past, and it doesn't really exist anymore, because the only thing that exists is this dimension of this eternal now, you can rescript that. You now rescript that life to learn from, and you rescript that so you can laugh intentionally, and you create a mindset, and you move to a point in that life, a moment of choice, where you could choose to move through that life in a different way. Either feeling resentful and hardened, or you can choose to move through it in a different way.
So there are many different healing modalities that a facilitator can use to help a client essentially heal themselves. We can offer up different visualizations or different healing modalities that help people either kind of re-script it, rewrite their soul story. It helps them kind of release heavy energetic baggage or any sort of attachments that you might have. And Eric took me through one that is often called re-scripting, where it's like you take a point in time in that past life and you make a change, and you make a change to that memory. And by making a change to that memory, you see how that can change the trajectory and the ultimate outcome of that life or of that situation or of that relationship. In the case of this re-scripting, we went back to one of the dinner scenes that my husband in that life and I in that life had been eating. So if you remember, there was 2 dinner scenes where we were sitting at the table, and one of the things that's going through my mind is like how much our relationship has disintegrated, has crumbled, and how sad it is that our connection is just shit compared to what it used to be. And so Eric facilitated me going back to and reliving again one of those dinner scenes.
We're eating soup. And I've been home a long time alone, and he's there eating with me. And normally I would maybe be a little crabby about it. But instead I try really hard and we find something to talk about that makes both of us laugh.
See it from above. But not only see it, but feel it from above. You can actually feel how that would feel different. Yeah. Can you feel that?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you could tell in this clip, but in this clip, the amount of joy and relief I feel watching this body, it's like I could see from the body's point of view and kind of from as if I was like drifting above the body. And it was like the difference I could see from both of us feeling like what I assume is him feeling disconnected as well. He looked tired and just kind of like disappointed, exhausted, exacerbated. And I seemed like resentful and just not satisfied, unhappy. And when I pushed through and said something that made us both laugh, it would be like if the tension was water and the water was like filled up to the ceiling, and the moment we start laughing, it's like someone pulled the plug and the water just drained. And the look in his face, and he has like these beautiful big blue eyes, and they go from just being like almost like lifeless to like totally vibrant. And it's like someone turned the color up on this experience. And so what I'm feeling, which is like I'm kind of choked up at the end, is just like this like pride that I was able to do that I have that power to do that I was then able to do it, because it wasn't easy to make that shift, and that I made the shift, and the shift was like even better than I thought it would be. And to see the look in his eyes go from just kind of vacant to vibrant, and how much I loved him and how much I cared about him, and being able to do that for him and do it for me was just like this wave of relief and joy and love for myself, love for him, love for us together, and for the work we were doing. And it was amazing to feel that. And it was amazing to feel that because even just being in that moment, that would be such a good feeling, because we've all felt that, right? Like tensions are high, and then someone says something and it just lets the air out, and in a good way. Like it just deflates all of that tension or anger, and you're just like so thankful for that person or for what they did or what you did if you were the one to do it. But coming at it just as a human, knowing that feeling, but now come at it like you've already lived that life. You've regretted the way you operated. You had a lot of sadness around this disconnection and this dissolution of your connection. And now you're able to like go back and redo it. I mean, I've never felt anything like that in my life, right? Because you don't get that in a third dimension life unless you're doing a past life regression. And the healing there and the relief was just like, it's hard to put into words. I mean, just like all the good feelings. So knowing that it was a shift that felt so big in that moment, then we know like tiny actions like this can change the trajectory of our lives, right? And so that's how you zoom out and heal in this modality of healing in a past life regression. So he had me move forward years in time to see the difference that this would make.
They lead you 5 to 10 years ahead in time. Feeling yourself in a new scene with new energies, lighter energies. And take a moment and just describe what's happening here.
He's walking home. He's walking through, I guess, our yard. And I don't feel, the only thing I feel is excitement to see him. Because I've missed him. And I run out and I give him a big hug. And it feels, I feel really happy and connected.
Oh, the difference I felt in our connection 5-10 years later. It was so different. It was like I didn't have any of that resentment, and I was waiting in our home for him, and I could see him from a long ways away. And it was like I was looking through the window and I'm like, is that him? Is that him? And it was pure joy. It wasn't like, God, he's been gone forever. When is he going to be here? Like it was before. It was just like pure joy. It was like enough times of pushing over that resentment and back to us, back to our connection, back to that laughter and that joy that we founded our partnership on. And so in this scene, 5-10 years later, he comes up over the hill up to our house, and the joy I feel, and it was like I felt it in my body as if it was real time, and I was running toward him and did one of those like Hollywood jump in the arms, and he gave me a hug and like twirled me around. And I can still feel it in my body and in my mind, that joy of like, you're here, and I love you, and I love this, and I love us, and I love our connection, and we've both worked hard to get here. And man, that was a game changer for me. Again, the parallels between who I was at that time and who I was in that past life were just unbelievable and totally unplanned. You know, like I said, I went in there with like a fear of commitment, and understanding that and getting over that was my goal. But it really, of course, it's never about the goal. It's about like, or the intention of like where we want to be. It's about like how we get there and how much that informs what we're going to be, who we're going to be, how we're going to feel when we hit that goal. And right, it's not about I want to get rid of my fear of commitment. Yeah, but it's like, no, I want to feel like love and joy with this person. If I can't do it every minute of every day, I want to do it as much as I can. And feeling this was like, wow. It's not only, again, it's not just this logical thought of that's what I want. It's like, whoa, I've felt that before. I know what that feels like. Now it's a memory and I can do it. I've done it before and I'll do it again. And so, man, the healing and the joy on an energetic level, on a mental level, it was so powerful for me back then, and it still is today. But back then, during this portion of the recording, like I'm just sobbing because I'm so fucking happy. And happy is just such a shit word to describe it. But it really is. It's amazing. So Eric let me bask in those emotions for a while. And then moving on from that space, from that memory, from that re-scripting, he then brought me back to just out of that life scene and back into that spiritual safe place where we can get guidance. And he asked what is, a big question in a past life regression when you get to this space after the death scene. And essentially, what is the lesson from this life? Or why did I see this life? What was the purpose of being shown this life?
And from the vantage point of the soul, of this eternal part of you, if there were a lesson to be learned in that life, what would it be?
To decide, I guess, intention. To live with intention. What do you want?
Okay.
And what do you want to focus on? And see what's most important. And then to live like it is the most important.
Figure out what's important and then live like it is the most important. And I'm not saying like we need to live like it, like talk about how important our relationships are, or our people are, or our pets, or our job, or whatever. I'm saying actually live like it. This is so common in these spiritual guidance spaces of a past life regression session, because the advice, in quotes, is so simple, but it is so profound. Like if you think about it just like in your own life, like when I think about it in like this past life perspective, was like, how often did I, this woman, choose my righteousness, my resentment, my negative feelings? How often did I choose those over my connection with my person, that man who I really loved? And it's not about just declaring what's important to you. It's about actually letting that inform every single decision that you make. And it doesn't have to be like unbelievably tedious. It's just a shift in the way you operate. Instead of thinking, oh, if I did this, I could make this much money, which is what we normally do in this culture. Think of it like, if I did this, how would that affect what's really important to me? man, that has been such a big change for me.
As you looked at that first version of that life before we rescripted it, did that life, the way it went and the way it ended, did that have anything to do with that fear of commitment of Gina? Did that energy get carried over?
Yeah. Yeah, it's more about how it's not about the commitment, it's about how I might not live to my potential, and it'll be real obvious.
Okay.
I guess it's just fear of not doing my best and having it be obvious.
Yeah, so it was like a fear of being attached to someone when I fail. Because I really felt like I let my husband down. Like on a soul level, it was just this knowing like I let him down. Or a belief that I let him down. And that's why I was so nervous to see him. I don't know if you remember, on my deathbed, what the overwhelming feeling was nervousness. And it wasn't nervousness to die. It was nervousness to see my husband again. Because I felt like I had really let him down. So it wasn't the fear of the commitment. It was the fear of being attached to someone when I fail, then they're disappointed too. It's not enough that I'm disappointed. It's that they're disappointed too. And that was what I was trying to avoid. And it was showing up in this life as Gina. And we would call that a fear of commitment. But it was really a fear of failure. And it's specifically a fear of failure while connected to someone, because I'm not afraid of risk. I'm someone who takes risks. From my point of view, as an entrepreneur since 2009 is when I started my first company, I've had a lot of failure. And whether it looked like that or not on the outside, like, I think it's pretty common for any entrepreneur or someone starting out to see a lot of failure in what they're doing, even if other people maybe are like, you're not failing, you're doing good. And it's like, well, I wasn't reaching this goal or whatever. I'm okay with failure. I mean, it feels like shit, but I'm not going to not do something if I feel like I might fail. But I will not do something in a partnership if I feel like I might fail. And so again, anytime we can illuminate a blind spot within us, we can use it to our advantage instead of just having it, blindly blindside us and have it inhibit us in ways that we don't even understand, so we can't stop it, or have it sabotage us in ways that we don't understand, so we can't stop it. And so that was very illuminating for me. And so when we are carrying a fear that has been with us, and you can directly tie it to a past life, then what we want to do is release that fear, because we're carrying it on a soul level. And if we don't release it, and sometimes just bringing it from the subconscious or the unconscious mind to the conscious mind will simply release it, and we can feel that. But sometimes when it's a little bit deeper, like a strong fear that's really showing up in our lives over and over again, we can actually take that energy and release it. And there are a few different ways to do it. And so Eric brought me through a releasing modality. And anytime you pull out an energy from your body, whether it's a fear or some sort of attachment or anything like that, what you want to do, just for good measure, is to pull in, like, essentially you're taking out the bad and you want to pull in some good. And I know it's not really bad and good, but it in human mind that makes sense. So you want to pull in something that you actually want to carry with you and fill that space that fear at one point filled up. So that's what Eric and I did together.
And as it comes back, it's pure energy that comes back. But if there were a word or two that could describe what comes back to you, what comes back to you?
Feeling vibrant. Just excited about life.
Yeah.
Don't I sound just like vibrant and excited about life in that clip? That cracks me up that I said it in that voice, I don't know why that's so funny to me, but it's like, you sound half dead. But yeah, that's what came back to me, was like this fear was blocking this sense of feeling like vibrant. And again, like that living life in full color, your full potential. And this excitement about life, instead of feeling so numb and just doing everything you can so you don't have to feel the negative things in life. And yeah, I still take that with me today. I still like hearing that today, feeling vibrant and excited about life. And, 4.5 years later, I'm, of course, not perfect at it because I'm a human. But I can definitely see how much better at that I am today than I was back then. And to me, that's a win. I mean, just as long as I'm like headed in the right direction with my progress and changes, that makes me happy. So that's another value and reason why I record these things, because I do like to go back and look at the notes or breeze through recordings and just to be like, okay, I am doing good. Like, even though some days feel like a little bit of a shit show emotionally, overall I'm trending in the right direction, and that's a good feeling. So then Eric had asked me, on a soul level, if you look at your life, what would this mean if you lived life with the values of feeling vibrant and really figuring out what's important and living like that's important and being excited about life? What would that mean for you in this life as Gina?
Just to decide ahead of time what's important, and then to live like it is important. But every day. And envision the parts of me that I like in the relationship, and then act like that, because I have it in me. Focusing on resentment or the boring aspects of life just makes me feel more resentful and bored.
I mean, I still use this all today. It is so ingrained in my operating system. And that's why it's so cool to do this podcast, because I would have never really, really dug into this audio recording like I am right now. But just what I said there of that, like, envision who I like to be in the relationship, who I know I have been before, and know that I still have that power in me. And it doesn't matter what emotions I'm feeling. If the emotions are like healthy and warranted, yes, move through them. But if I'm just being like righteous in my resentfulness and I don't need to, like, let that shit go. And like, instead of focusing on like what makes me so bored or what am I resentful of or what's frustrating in my life, instead of really focusing on that, just shift my focus on like the good things that I've experienced, the good parts of my personality that I like. And in just shifting that focus, like, my whole world changes. The color is more vibrant. I'm excited about things again. And that really changed my life.
To fix what you can and focus on what's important. Not how you think life should be, but how you want it to feel. Every day.
And you focus on what's important. And what is it that's important?
Laughing together. When we laugh a lot, we're in a really good spot.
Mm-hmm.
And when I said that, when we laugh a lot, we're in a really good spot, that is true. That's true for my past life self in that relationship that I was analyzing. But it's also true for Alex and I. Like, the more we laugh, the more just easier and better. Like, we're in a good spot. And I think that's so cool, like the parallel between the two lives. So Eric asked me, as you're feeling this shift, what does this part of you want to tell the part of you that had a fear of commitment or that fear of failure while in partnership.
The commitment is just kind of another magnifying on glass on life. So if I'm not living to my fullest potential with intention, focusing on what's important, that doesn't feel good. And it's like I'm used to or okay with, and I don't want to be okay with it. I don't feel like I would be anymore with feeling that way alone. But when you have a commitment, then you hurt someone else.
So when you're not living up to your potential, a commitment feels more scary.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I felt like I really hurt my husband.
Okay. In that past life?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so part of you holds back and is afraid of that in this, was afraid of that in this life. Is that it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So after that clarification and reiteration of kind of the whole package of the lessons of that life or why I saw that life, then Eric asked me if there was anything else that I wanted to look at or anything else I wanted to inquire about. And what I said was, I wish I could apologize to my husband in that life, again, because I felt like I really let him down. And so I wanted to apologize to him or somehow, like on a soul level, like make amends or just make it feel a little better.
What would you say? What would you tell him?
I would say that I would thank him for seeing that potential in me.
Yeah.
But apologize for not living up to it.
Okay.
And then I would tell him that I'm doing better in this life. I don't know if that means anything to him, but I'm sorry.
See yourself telling that to his past life image. Saying it from your heart. Being fully present with him. Notice him now in the eyes and face. What is his response in just this moment?
He's happy for me.
Yeah.
This was incredibly healing and, again, a big relief because on my deathbed, the nervousness I felt at having to like meet him again was so intense because I just felt like I really failed him again. I felt like I failed him and it was just like the worst feeling in the world because he saw something that was so great in me and I did not live up to that. And not only did I not live up to that, but I like drug him down with me. And that was my point of view. I don't know what his point of view was. But to see his face and feel the love and gratitude from him in that soul space was incredible. It was incredible. I know that forgiveness is something we give ourselves, but to see someone who you thought would be like so pissed at you because you feel like you just totally failed them, and to have that person come at you with nothing but love and compassion, which of course they did. That is life on the astral plane. It's all about love and compassion. we lose our third dimension egos and mind games and guilt and resentment. But man, that was really, really powerful. Really powerful. So cool. And to see his bright blue, like just loving eyes just like melt, and to feel that love coming from him was out of this world, because it was out of this world. Really cool. So I recently met someone who I'm pretty sure, and if I have a knowing, it's usually right on. And this is one of those knowings that I'm pretty sure I met this person. I met this person a few months ago, and I didn't say anything to this person, but I knew, and they felt something on a soul level too, it's my understanding. But I was just in a position where I felt like that might be a little freaky if I was like, hey, I think we were married in a past life. Like, I don't know. I just err on the side of, like, I wave my freak flag, but I don't want to make anyone feel super weird if I don't have to. So it's like, I'd rather wait for them to come to me and be like, so I'm feeling this on a deep soul level. And another thing too, with if I have had past life regressions with other people who I know in this life and we're friends, and it's a way, and even Alex, my husband, I've seen him in past lives, and I'll tell people that, but I never tell them the details, because if they see me in a past life, I want them to know it's like authentic and coming to them authentically, and not be like, am I having this memory because Gina told me that this was her memory and now I'm having it? So I'll tell people I've seen you in a past life, but those are about all the details that I give them. And the cool thing is, when you see someone in a past life, they have a lot of the same energy that they do in this life. It's like, it's a really cool thing to see. And I don't ever want to rob anybody of that experience. I want them to come upon it authentically and in their own mind's eye. So there we have it, my first past life regression. Thank you so much for listening. It was such a joy to dig in and go through it. And, like I mentioned earlier, all of these things still are a part of my operating system today. It's still how I live my life today. I really do, like on a regular basis, check in with what's important and live like that. And I think that if we don't do that, what happens is we get caught up in this capitalistic society, this culture of consuming and doing and comparing, and we start to live our lives as if making the most money was the most important thing, or having a beautiful kitchen was the most important thing. And I'm not saying that money and kitchens aren't the keys to some people's happiness, but I think a lot of times that stuff distracts us and it pulls energy away from what's really important to us. And as humans, on a soul level, it's connection, it's love, it's compassion, it's having purpose, it's helping out, it's being a part of the bigger picture, trending in the more compassionate, loving direction. And so to live like that every day is something I still do. It's something I still keep really a close eye on. And one of the things that's, if not the most important thing, it's right there, I think it is the most important thing in my life, is my connection to Alex. And any job that gets in the way of it, any person that gets in the way of it, any life circumstance that gets in the way of it, needs to be fixed, needs to be altered, or needs to get the fuck out. And that's just like how I operate. And I don't have to justify it to anybody, why that's important to me and why I'm living my life that way. And guess what? I hope that you listening to this, you get that too. This is your permission slip to figure out what's important and to live that every day. And speaking of you, while you were listening to this episode, did you think of anyone like, oh, I think so-and-so would love to hear this, or somebody really needs to hear this? If you have a friend or a family member or someone who you thought of while you were listening to this episode, could you do me a favor? Could you send this episode to them? I want to get the word out. I want to have these conversations. So I need everybody who's listening to let me know what you thought. Spread the word. I want to keep these conversations going. My intention for this podcast is to make it a conversation. I don't just want to talk into this microphone every other week and send it into the black hole. of iTunes and Google and the internet. I want to actually have a real conversation. So send it to a friend, have a conversation with them. If you want to have a conversation with me, I'm all ears. I would love to hear what you thought about this. Head over to Instagram. At Instagram, I am pastlives.tourguide. And you can head to pastlivesanddedivine.com to access other episodes of this podcast. And you can subscribe to the email list, and I will show up in your inbox about every other week with information about the newest episode on the podcast or anything else that's going on, events or gatherings. So there you have it. Thank you so much for listening and being open to the power of your past lives and all of our eternal soul experiences while we walk this third dimension earth together. As always, take anything from this episode that makes you feel better and just leave the rest right there. Thanks so much. See you soon.